Move your face now or I'll stay right here forever. Her voice slithered through the darkness, low and vibrating with barely contained energy. He wasn't sure if she meant it as a threat or a tease, but the weight of her body was pressing down firmly on his cheek, and for a moment, he forgot every rule of polite conversation. There he was, flat on the cold metal deck, pinned by a creature whose presence was undeniable. The swirl of purple bioluminescence that danced across her exposed arms was mesmerizing, an exotic gleam that hinted at a world entirely different from his own. She shifted just enough so he could roll to the side, his heart hammering against his rib cage, as if protesting the abrupt collision between his normal life and whatever this moment was becoming. He propped himself up on an elbow, swallowing a breath that was laced with the heady perfume of her skin. She smelled like ozone and night-blooming flowers, and he couldn't decide if that scent was manufactured by her body or by the environmental suit she half wore, half peeled off. Her luminous eyes flickered over him, scanning his gear, his disheveled hair, the sweat collecting at his temples. She was tall and lithe, with a set of thin filament-like structures curving around her neck that pulsed with faint light. He'd never seen an alien quite like her before, and in his line of work, he thought he'd seen it all. She cocked her head to the side, lips parted as though she were about to deliver another cutting remark. He found himself wondering how she learned his language or if she was improvising from stolen data files. Sometimes aliens he encountered had a rudimentary knowledge from corporate broadcasts or scavenged translators, but she spoke with surprising fluency, her accent rolling each syllable like a lilt of stars across a black sky. He took a shaky breath. "That's one way to say hello," he managed, forcing a hint of bravado into his words. "But if it's all the same to you, I'd prefer a handshake next time." She didn't move away. Instead, she pressed in a little closer, thighs bracketing him so her knees pinned the edges of his shoulders. He realized with sudden clarity that her posture was intensely intimate, nearly humiliating. He tried not to shiver as heat coursed through his skin. "Maybe I prefer this," she said, voice dropping lower. "I wasn't exactly aiming for your face, but you got in the way. Now that you're here, though, maybe I'll keep you." He felt his lungs tighten. "Keep me? Sorry, I'm not a piece of cargo for sale." Her gaze narrowed, pupils shimmering gold within violet irises. "Some men around here might disagree, especially if they catch you meddling in these ruins. Humans don't belong on this planet. Your presence alone is enough to cause trouble, for you, for me." He tried to parse her words, the seriousness beneath that teasing threat. She was strong, he could feel the tension in her legs, and obviously at home in these half-collapsed corridors. They were in the remains of a deserted outpost, its metal walkways warped from old battles or atmospheric conditions. He could see the faint flicker of ancient lighting overhead. He'd come here chasing rumors of salvageable tech. Instead, he'd found her, an alien woman with an attitude as sharp as any blade he'd faced, who apparently thought pinning him was the best introduction. "Look," he ventured, "I don't mean you any harm. I'm just here to scavenge some old parts. No trouble. No fight." Her fingers flexed against his chest, nails lightly scraping the synthetic fabric of his flight suit. "And I should believe you because—" He let out a breath, straining under her weight. She didn't seem inclined to ease off, and a rebellious corner of his mind admitted he didn't entirely mind. Still, he fought to keep his voice even. "Because you'd have killed me by now if you wanted to. And if I wanted to hurt you, well, I'd have tried harder to get you off me." Something flickered in her gaze, surprise, perhaps, or a grudging respect. She slid back, and he took the opportunity to scramble upright. She rose too, swiftly, her body moving with a sinuous grace that spoke of powerful muscle and an otherworldly architecture beneath her shimmering skin. He was tall by human standards, but she was nearly his height, her limbs long and elegant. Her face was expressive, high cheekbones, lips parted as if tasting the air around them, neck filaments rising slightly. He struggled to regain control of his heartbeat. "We started off on the wrong foot, apparently. My name's Ionas." He offered a hand, feeling ridiculous because she was an alien who'd just pinned him and might not even understand the gesture. But she glanced at his outstretched hand, something like curiosity twitching at the corner of her mouth. She brushed her fingertips against his palm, then withdrew with a sly grin. "Reeve," she said. Her voice had lost some of its earlier hostility, replaced by a guarded curiosity. "Why are you here, Ionas? This place is cursed to my people. No one sets foot here unless they're desperate or a fool." He let out a shaky chuckle. "I might be both. I heard there were leftover bits of tech that could fetch a high price. I pilot a small cargo ship, do a bit of freelance scavenging. Places like this might hold a reactor coil or two, maybe a half-functional thruster manifold. Anything's better than starving in a corner of known space." Reeves' eyes flicked over the battered corridor, neon spores drifting in the stale air. "You risk your life for scraps. Is that how humans survive? By taking what others leave behind?" He shrugged uncomfortably. "You do what you have to. Look, what about you? Are you guarding this place?" He paused, recalling the press of her body against his, the fleeting smirk. "Or just greeting wanderers in your own special way?" A flicker of amusement tugged at her lips. "My people once lived here, centuries ago. We left when the war turned in our favor, but some stayed behind to preserve certain relics. I'm here because I need to find something that was stolen. Something precious to my clan. And the presence of a human rummaging around these halls is problematic." There was a pause as Ionas digested her words. War. Centuries of conflict. He wondered how old she was, or how her species aged, how they measured time. Was she a warrior? An outcast? He glanced at her slender frame, the slightest ripple along her ribs when her filaments fluttered. She looked strong but not heavily armored. Then again, many alien races hid formidable prowess behind unassuming forms. "I won't interfere with your mission," he said carefully, "if you won't kill me for being here." Her gaze pinned him, that violet shimmer threatening to swallow him whole. "Kill you? No, that wouldn't serve me. I might have other plans for you." He felt the back of his neck prickle. "Plans like what?" A sly curl shaped her mouth. "We'll see how things go, Ionas. Maybe you'll be useful. Maybe you'll be trouble. But I don't think I'll regret letting you live, yet." Her hand grazed his shoulder. He felt heat spread through him like a slow wave, and for a moment he remembered her weight on his face, that humiliating and strangely thrilling press. His cheeks burned. He cleared his throat and forced himself to step back, painfully aware of how close she stood, how her scent had embedded itself in his lungs. They eyed each other in the hush of the corridor, dust motes flickering through the feeble lighting. She was right. Humans didn't belong here, and neither did anyone else. The war had ravaged this place, leaving its architecture battered and half-sunken. Yet here they both were, forging an uneasy alliance from a chance encounter. If he was lucky, she wouldn't decide to slit his throat in his sleep. If she was lucky, he wasn't the type to backstab or squeal to corporate raiders about finding a living alien caretaker of these old ruins. Without another word, Reeve turned on her heel and began walking, her filaments casting a soft glow on the corridor walls. Ionas took a breath and followed, unsure if he was making the worst mistake of his life or stumbling onto a future he never thought possible. The metallic clang of their footsteps echoed as they ventured deeper into the derelict halls. He noted the runic etchings along the walls, reminiscent of ancient star charts or genealogies. She occasionally slid her fingers across the carved surfaces, as though seeking direction from the ghosts of her ancestors. They came upon a large chamber, its vaulted ceiling partially collapsed. A thick layer of dust coated the floor, disturbed only by faint footprints leading in and out of the darkness. Reeve's filaments glowed more brightly here, painting the area with an eerie lilac hue. He could see shapes in the corners, tall obelisks, broken statuary, scraps of battered machinery. It reminded him of cathedrals he'd once seen in old Earth transmissions, except there was a distinctly alien architecture that gave it a curve, an organic flow that defied standard human geometry. Reeve paused in the center of the space, turning to Ionas. "Tell me something. Do you humans always just barge into forbidden places, searching for trinkets to sell?" He brushed a strand of hair from his eyes, trying not to feel defensive. Desperate times, you know. Most of the galaxy is carved up by corporations or interplanetary alliances. Independent scavengers like me have to find what we can. I don't exactly enjoy rummaging through the remnants of war, but I don't have many options. Then maybe we have something in common, she said softly, surprising him with a hint of empathy in her tone. I don't want to be here either, rummaging through the ashes of my people. But I have no choice. There's something that belongs to my family. It was hidden here but stolen before the war ended. I've been hunting it for years. He studied her face. The flickering lights of her filaments highlighted sadness around her eyes, a deep sorrow. Was she alone in her quest? Did her clan cast her out, or did she choose this mission of her own free will? He felt a tug of compassion. Maybe we can help each other. She laughed, the sound echoing off the cold walls. You're quick to align yourself with me. Weren't you just pinned under me a few minutes ago? His cheeks flushed. We can forget that ever happened, if you want. She stepped closer, and for a moment, he felt that wave of magnetic tension again, as if the space between them was charged with electricity. I'm not sure I want to forget, she murmured. But let's start with a truce, Ionas. If you help me find what I need, maybe I'll help you find something worth selling, something that won't attract the wrath of my people or any corporate overlords. He wondered what that might entail. For a second, an image flashed in his mind of her sitting on him, teasing him, whispering something scandalous. He pushed it away. This was no time for that. Right now, they were two survivors forging a fragile pact in the dark corridors of a place that should have remained buried. Deal, he said, offering his hand again. This time she clasped it more firmly, her skin oddly warm, her eyes full of hidden galaxies. They parted, drifting away to search the edges of the chamber. Ionas inspected a half-buried console, brushing away debris to see if it still worked. Reeve prowled around the obelisks, occasionally crouching to trace symbols etched in the base. Their silence was a comfortable one, occasionally broken by the shuffle of their boots. A sense of heightened awareness buzzed in the back of his mind, as if he were more alive than ever, every nerve firing under the watchful gaze of an alien woman who could end him or rescue him at a whim. An hour might have passed, maybe more. Time lost its meaning as they combed through the shadows, searching for hidden compartments or concealed vaults. Ionas found a few battered scrap pieces, a defunct coil, fragments of an advanced energy lattice, but nothing that looked salvageable enough to fetch the big credits. Meanwhile, Reeve grew increasingly frustrated. Her filaments kept flickering, pulses of color that betrayed her inner agitation. He occasionally glanced her way and saw her frowning, touching the walls as if hoping they'd reveal some old secret. Eventually, she let out a long sigh. It's not here. Or it's hidden better than I thought. Ionas rose from the console he was examining, stretching cramped muscles. We could check the lower levels. These outposts usually had subchambers or maintenance tunnels. Might be a vault somewhere. She nodded, though a hint of weariness clouded her expression. Yes. Let's. But we need to be careful. There are old security measures that might still be active. And other scavengers. He swallowed. Other scavengers usually meant trouble. Often they worked in packs, sometimes aligned with black market dealers who wouldn't hesitate to kill for rare tech or valuable artifacts. And if Reeve's relic was truly important, it might attract far more dangerous forces than just random looters. All right, he said, squaring his shoulders. Lead the way. They found an old stairwell at the far corner of the chamber, partially caved in. The metal steps groaned beneath their combined weight, ominous echoes reverberating through the gloom. Ionas kept close behind Reeve, both to lend her support if the ground crumbled and because he couldn't help being fascinated by the subtle glow of her filaments. They descended cautiously, the corridor curving deeper into the substructure. Pale luminescent fungus clung to the walls, lending a ghostly radiance that made the whole place feel alive in its hush. Ionas listened to Reeve's breathing. At times it quickened, perhaps from tension or from some intangible sense of memory tied to these ruins. He wondered what her life had been like before. Was she a soldier? A royal? A priestess from a lost temple? He remembered how she'd pinned him in that bizarre greeting and how it had left him breathless, half in shock, half in raw surprise at the intimacy of their bodies aligned. A thread of that surprise still coiled in his chest. She was dangerous, yet he couldn't help feeling a surge of protectiveness. He tried to quiet those thoughts and focus on where he placed his feet, sure that a single misstep might drop them into an unseen chasm. "How big is this place?" he asked in a hushed tone. "Big enough to get lost in," Reeve replied, voice echoing softly. "My ancestors built these structures over centuries, reinforcing them with technology that still eludes most other species. Even if the war ended long ago, some of our wards remain. I'd rather not trigger them." "Understood," Ionas muttered, stepping carefully over a suspicious ridge in the floor. They navigated a series of twisting tunnels, each with strange markings. Occasionally, Reeve paused to decipher them, trailing her fingertips over the carved script. He couldn't read the alien runes, but he could sense that her mood darkened as they pushed on. Now and then, her tail, he realized she had one, slender and coiling behind her, would twitch or lash, betraying her rising frustration. At length, they entered a room sealed by a large, rusting gate. The panel beside it was broken, a tangle of wires and burned-out crystals. Reeve knelt to examine it, her filaments flaring with subdued brilliance. Ionas crouched beside her, producing a small toolkit from his belt. Their shoulders brushed, and he felt the warmth of her body through the thin fabrics they wore. It was a fleeting contact, yet it sent an unexpected pulse of heat through him. She tilted her head toward him, a faint smirk on her lips. "You're a pilot and a scavenger. Are you also an engineer?" He shrugged. "Basic repairs. Enough to hack a door panel if it's not too complicated." He fiddled with the wires. "I might be able to jumpstart this mechanism, but if there's any advanced alien security, we could be in for a shock, literally." She nodded, stepping aside to give him room. He felt her watchful stare as he worked. Some minutes passed, the air thick with tension. The dryness in his throat grew more pronounced, and beads of sweat formed on his brow, though he couldn't tell if it was from the humidity in the sublevel or the awareness of Reeve's presence. She was close enough that he could smell that ozone-like scent again, mixed with her own subtle musk. It drew him in, stirring the memory of how she'd pressed her hips against him in that first crazy encounter. He forced himself to focus. After a few more attempts, he managed to bypass a set of fused circuits, bridging them with a spool of conductive wire. There was a spark, a hiss, and the door mechanism whirred weakly to life. A moment later, the massive gate rumbled open, revealing a hallway thick with stagnant air. Reeve glanced his way, an impressed flicker crossing her eyes. "Not bad," she said. "Perhaps you'll make a useful companion after all." He tried to mask his grin with a casual shrug. "Just try not to sit on my face again, and we'll call it even." She arched an eyebrow, and for a moment, the tension between them crackled. "Oh? You didn't enjoy that?" Her tone was teasing, and the corner of her lips curved as she turned and walked into the hallway. He swallowed hard. He wasn't sure if she was flirting or mocking him, and the realization that he almost didn't care, he kind of liked it either way, had him unsettled. They ventured deeper, stepping over fallen beams and collapsed segments of floor. The corridor eventually opened into another chamber, smaller than the one above but filled with rows of metal shelves. Many were toppled, rusting, or covered in dust-laden tarps. Ionas felt a surge of excitement. Storage rooms often contained salvageable tech or relics. Reeve, however, moved with a lethal grace, scanning every shadow as if expecting an ambush. "Stay close," she warned in a quiet whisper, tail flicking behind her. He bristled at the command. He hated being ordered around, but he sensed the seriousness in her tone. Something felt off here. The darkness was too quiet. Even the faint hum of old circuits was missing, replaced by a suffocating silence that weighed on his ears. He moved to check one of the shelves, carefully lifting a tattered cloth. Underneath lay a cluster of small devices shaped like elongated pods. They might have been data recorders or something more sinister. He slipped one into a pouch, figuring he'd inspect it later. Reeve, Meanwhile, crouched near the back of the room, her slender fingers pressing against a portion of the wall that looked different from the rest. Iona's edged closer, noticing faint symbols etched in a tight cluster. "I think there's a hidden panel here," she murmured, eyes gleaming with sudden intensity. "Help me move this shelf." Together, they strained to push the rusted structure aside. It screeched in protest, scattering debris across the floor. Behind it lay a recessed indentation in the wall, shaped like a handprint. Reeve placed her palm on it, filaments brightening with anxious anticipation. For a tense moment, nothing happened, then a soft glow spread along the outline of her hand. The wall parted, revealing a hidden alcove. Inside, there was a pedestal with a small, smooth orb resting on a velvet cushion that had long since faded to dusty rags. Reeve exhaled, her breath trembling. Iona's could see the wonder in her eyes, the swirl of emotion that danced over her expression. "This isn't what was stolen, but it's part of my family's legacy," she whispered, voice thick with longing. She gingerly lifted the orb, and it glowed in response, as if attuned to her presence. Iona's hovered behind her, feeling unexpectedly moved by the reverence in her demeanor. "What is it?" he asked softly. "A memory sphere," she answered, her filaments fluttering. "It holds the recorded experiences of my ancestors. Songs, histories, maybe even glimpses of the relic I'm searching for. If I can access it, it might guide me to the artifact." He recognized the significance of intangible cultural items. Though he never had a family heirloom of his own, he grew up drifting from port to port. He understood the longing for roots. "That's incredible," he murmured. "I hope it helps." Her gaze flicked toward him, and for once, there was no teasing glint in her eyes, just a naked vulnerability he hadn't seen before. "Maybe you'll see, too," she said, almost to herself. Then she pressed the orb to her chest, letting it flare with a gentle violet light that matched the hue of her filaments. The sight was breathtaking, as if her entire being resonated with the artifact in her hands. Before either of them could speak further, a sudden roar echoed in the corridor beyond. Iona's felt his blood run cold, instincts screaming danger. Reeve spun around, tucking the orb safely in a pouch at her side. They stared at the entrance, hearing the shuffle of heavy footsteps. It wasn't just one or two people, there sounded like a group, moving fast. "More scavengers?" Iona's whispered. Reeve's posture tensed, her tail swishing in agitation. "Perhaps. Or something worse. Either way, we can't stay here." She gestured for him to follow, grabbing his arm. They slipped through a side exit, heartbeats hammering, the memory sphere's glow pulsing in time with Reeve's fear. They hurried into a narrow passage, the sound of their pursuers growing louder. Iona's could pick out guttural voices, harsh laughter. Whoever they were well armed. Reeve halted at a junction, glancing left and right. "Which way?" she hissed, though it was more rhetorical than anything. She didn't know these hallways any better than he did, not after centuries of decay and destruction. "Left," Ionas said impulsively, spotting a faint flicker of neon fungus that might mark an exit route. They ducked around the corner just as a group of hulking shapes burst into view from behind them, flashlights stabbing into the gloom. Ionas glimpsed the silhouettes, scaled armor, heavy rifles. Possibly mercenaries or black market enforcers. His pulse kicked into overdrive. He and Reeve had no chance in a direct fight unless she was hiding a significant arsenal somewhere on her lithe frame. She gripped his hand, pulling him forward. They ran through labyrinthine corridors, taking turns at random, boots clanging on the metal. At intervals, the walls shook with distant detonations, old traps or security systems triggered by these intruders. Ionas dreaded the idea of stumbling into an even bigger threat. The air grew stale, the environment more claustrophobic, as if the outpost itself were swallowing them whole. Reeve's grip was surprisingly reassuring. He'd half expected her to abandon him the moment trouble arose, but she stayed close, her quick breaths mingling with his. There was a momentary lull in the chase. They pressed themselves into a recess behind a collapsed beam, trying to stifle the sound of their panting. Ionas could feel Reeve's body trembling lightly against him. Adrenaline? Fear? Anger? He parted his lips, about to whisper reassurance, when the overhead lights flickered for a moment, ancient backups reacting to a surge. In that flash, he saw Reeve's face, her violet eyes wide. Their gazes locked, and 1,000 unspoken thoughts pulsed between them. She leaned slightly against him, and he felt the curve of her waist under his hand. Despite the danger, or maybe because of it, every nerve in his body screamed awareness of her closeness. She spoke so quietly he almost didn't catch it. "Stay with me." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The hush stretched, broken only by the distant chatter of the mercenaries searching for them. Then, in a sudden soft movement, Reeve touched her forehead to his. It was a fleeting contact, intimate in a way he never experienced. She drew back, exhaling. He understood it as both an apology for dragging him into her dangerous world and a promise that she wouldn't abandon him. At last, the voices receded, and they slipped deeper into the gloom, side by side, forging an alliance out of necessity, out of mutual curiosity, and perhaps, out of a growing bond neither could yet define. They had a relic to find, pursuers to evade, and a memory sphere that might hold secrets from a bygone age. And through it all, Iona's couldn't shake the lingering imprint of Reeve's body pressed against his, nor forget that first shocking moment when she pinned him with fearless aggression. Somehow, this was just the beginning of a journey that would test them both to their limits, physical, emotional, and something far more potent, simmering just beneath the surface. They found a secluded antechamber to catch their breath. Old crates and shattered equipment lay strewn about, the walls pockmarked with laser burns. Ionas checked his small portable scanner for life signs. It flickered uncertainly, barely picking up their own readings through the thick interference of the sublevel. Reeve leaned against a broken column, the memory sphere in her hands still faintly glowing. She appeared calmer now that they'd momentarily escaped their pursuers, yet her eyes remained vigilant. "Why do you think they're here?" he asked in a hushed tone, gesturing to the direction they'd come from. She shook her head. "This place is rumored to hold ancient tech. Maybe they heard the same rumors you did, or maybe they have a lead on my relic. Either way, they're dangerous. My people know of them, mercenaries loyal to whichever warlord or corporation pays more." His jaw clenched. "Then we'll have to outsmart them. If we can find a path to the surface or a hidden hangar, I can fly us out of here." Reeve's lips curled into a half-smile. "Us? Already thinking about rescuing me, pilot?" He tried not to show how her teasing made his pulse quicken. "You said we're in this together. Right?" She stepped closer, her tail lightly tapping the ground. "We are Iona's. For now." He ignored the flicker of disappointment at her last words. "That memory sphere, can you access it? Maybe it can show you where your relic is kept." She sighed, cradling the orb in both hands. "It requires a calm mind to unlock. My emotions are unsettled. But maybe I can try. Will you keep watch?" He nodded and took a position near the entrance of the chamber, scanning the corridors for any signs of movement. Meanwhile, Reeve sank onto a flat piece of rubble, closing her eyes. The orb's glow intensified, and the filaments along her neck brightened in response. He stood guard, heart pounding, acutely aware of every breath she took. The swirling colors reflecting off her skin cast an almost hypnotic pattern across the walls. Minutes passed, then a faint hum rose from the sphere. It was like music, but not quite, more a resonance that stirred something inside Iona's chest. He glanced over his shoulder to see Reeve trembling, tears slipping from the corners of her tightly shut eyes. He felt an urge to comfort her, but he remained at his post, suspecting the process required solitude. The hum built in intensity, then abruptly vanished. Reeve gasped, as though she'd been holding her breath under water. The orb went dark. He rushed over, heart in his throat. "You okay?" Her eyes fluttered open, shimmering with suppressed emotion. "I saw them. My ancestors. A time before the war. Children playing in these halls when they were still vibrant and full of light. Then, the war came. It was horrific. Our relic, the Heartspire, was secreted away beneath a grand temple. That temple was destroyed, but the vault might still remain intact. Iona's placed a hand on her shoulder. She didn't shrug him off. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her breath warm against his wrist. So the relic is called the Heart Spire? That's what you're looking for. She nodded, filaments flickering. Yes. My clan entrusted it to guardians, but I don't know if they survived. The mercenaries might be after it too. It holds great power, some kind of synergy with the planet's core, rumored to grant unimaginable energy. In the wrong hands, it could be catastrophic. He exhaled, the gravity of the situation sinking in. We'd better find it first, then. She let out a mirthless laugh. Easier said than done, pilot. The temple's location might be deeper underground, closer to the planet's crust. And these tunnels are a maze, especially after centuries of disrepair. Ionas glanced around. Any hints from those images? Markers? Symbols we can follow? Reeve touched her temple. I saw glimpses. An emblem shaped like a crescent within a spiral. My ancestors used it to mark paths to sacred sites. If we find that symbol, we might be on the right track. He nodded. Let's start looking. If we move carefully, we can avoid the mercenaries. They set off again, tension thrumming between them, yet now there was a shared purpose that bound them more closely than before. Ionas took the lead with his scanner, though it was frustratingly unreliable. Reeve walked beside him, gaze sweeping the walls for any sign of the crescent spiral symbol. Occasionally, he caught her studying him from the corner of her eye, as though trying to decipher who he was beneath his scruffy exterior. He felt a foolish spark of pride that she might be curious about him. How did you end up alone? She asked quietly, during a moment when the corridor broadened and the threat of mercenaries seemed distant. He considered deflecting, but something about her quiet sincerity coaxed honesty from him. I left my home colony a decade ago. I was young, reckless, took a job as a transport pilot. Turns out it was a front for smuggling. Got caught up in a corporate dispute. One thing led to another, and I ended up on the run, taking whatever jobs I could. I guess you could say I've been alone ever since. Her gaze softened. Sounds lonely. He shrugged, forcing a wry smile. It is what it is. I'm used to it. Anyway, enough about me. What about you? You said you've been hunting this relic for years? She hesitated, her tail flicking. I was part of a small group dedicated to preserving our heritage. My clan, well, most of them have moved on, integrated with allied species or retreated to distant worlds. Few remain who still believe in the Heartspire's importance. So I've done this mostly by myself. Maybe I'm a fool to cling to the old ways. Or maybe you're brave, Iona said. He meant it. He could see in her eyes that she was driven by something deeper than greed or ambition, a longing for connection to her past, to her identity, as one of these ancient people. He admired that, even if it seemed hopeless. They fell silent again, focusing on traversing the corridor. Occasional cracks in the walls revealed glimpses of swirling dust storms outside the outpost. Ionas noted that the planet's surface was harsh, not easily survivable without proper gear. If they had to escape on foot, it would be dangerous. He glanced at Reeve's slender form. She wore a partial suit that shielded her from the environment, but it was clearly of alien design. He wondered if she could survive the planet's conditions better than he could. Eventually, they found a crossway with several branching paths. Reeve's filaments flared in sudden excitement. She knelt by a collapsed signpost, brushing away centuries of grime. Underneath, Ionas could make out the faint carving of a crescent within a spiral. This is it, she whispered. We're close. His heart gave a leap. Then let's move. They took the corridor marked by the symbol, descending yet another flight of steps. The air grew thicker, more humid, and Ionas felt sweat clinging to his back. Reeve seemed equally unsettled, her breath labored as they ventured deeper. Still, they pressed on, motivated by the quiet hum of possibility. At last, the corridor opened into a massive atrium, part of which had caved in. A ramp on the far side led even further down. The atrium itself looked like it had once been grand, with sweeping arches and mosaic floors. Now, large chunks of debris littered the space, and Iona spotted the remains of old defense drones, their metallic shells corroded by time. A faint, flickering overhead lamp provided just enough light to see by. Reeve approached the center, her eyes shining. This must have been a communal space. If we follow that ramp, maybe it leads to the temple vault. She turned to Iona's, her expression almost fragile in its hope. We're very close, I can feel it. He reached out to touch her arm reassuringly when, suddenly, the ramp exploded in a burst of red energy. Debris showered them, forcing Iona's to pull Reeve to the floor, shielding her with his body. The ringing in his ears drowned out all sound. When his vision cleared, he saw a squad of mercenaries standing at the top of a broken walkway overlooking the atrium. Their leader, a hulking figure in matte black armor, aimed a smoking energy rifle right at them. Hand over whatever you found, the mercenary bellowed. And we might let you live. Reeve hissed under her breath, pressing the memory sphere protectively against her chest. Iona's heart pounded. They had no real cover, no advantage. He glared up at the mercenaries, cursing under his breath for underestimating how quickly they'd track them down. The leader barked another command, voice echoing through the wounded architecture. Iona's glanced at Reeve, reading the fear and defiance in her posture. He gripped her hand, urging her to stay down. The mercenaries advanced in formation, rifles leveled. Iona's had only a small blaster at his side, and Reeve didn't appear to carry any conventional weapon. They were outmatched. His mind raced. There had to be a way out, some structural weakness, some leftover defense system he could exploit. But the atrium was open, with minimal cover. Despair curled in his stomach. The leader, impatient, fired another warning shot that slammed into a chunk of debris near Reeve's shoulder. She flinched, her filaments sparking with alarm. The next shot wouldn't be a warning. Iona's clenched his jaw, about to do something reckless, like stand up and bluff, when Reeve inhaled sharply. Her eyes flashed with an internal light, and she lifted the memory sphere high. The orb blazed with violet brilliance, painting the entire atrium in swirling patterns of luminescence. A piercing tone rang out, making Iona's wince. The mercenaries hesitated, clearly disoriented by the sudden display of alien power. Reeve rose to her feet, back straight, orb pulsing in her hands. Iona scrambled up alongside her, heart hammering. He wasn't sure what she was doing, but the sphere had awakened something in the environment. A hidden mechanism within the outpost? Or perhaps the orb itself was reacting to the presence of intruders. Suddenly, the floor shuddered. Ancient panels lit up across the atrium's perimeter, revealing dormant security drones that began to whir to life. Their eyes glowed the same color as Reeve's orb, as if they recognized her authority. Iona's had just enough time to drag Reeve behind a crumbling pillar before the drones unleashed a barrage of energy bolts at the mercenaries. Shouts of alarm filled the cavernous space as the intruders scrambled for cover. Reeve clutched the orb, breathing hard. Iona's couldn't help but grin in astonishment. "You just activated the outpost's defense grid?" he whispered. She blinked, as though awakening from a trance. I think so. I didn't know it would respond to me. Maybe my genetic signature is close enough to the original inhabitants to grant me partial control." Her voice was shaky, but he could see the determined set of her jaw. While the mercenaries were pinned down, Iona's and Reeve darted across the atrium, seeking an exit that would lead them closer to the temple vault. Energy bolts ricocheted off walls, sparks dancing in the gloom. Smoke and dust choked the air, but the drones maintained a relentless assault, halting the mercenaries' advance. Iona's prayed that these old machines wouldn't suddenly turn on him and Reeve once they were done dealing with the intruders. They slid behind a fractured column, scanning for a clear route. The ramp was partially destroyed, but there was a section they could climb down if they were careful. Iona's yelled above the clamor. "We'll have to jump the gap." Reeve nodded, clutching the orb. Together, they sprinted, leaps of faith guided by adrenaline and desperation. Iona's felt the rush of wind as energy blasts streaked past them. He landed heavily on a broken section of the ramp, nearly tumbling over the edge. Reeve seized his arm, steadying him, her eyes full of concern. For a moment they were pressed close, hearts pounding in unison. He felt her trembling, though whether it was fear or adrenaline, he couldn't say. "Thanks," he gasped, forcing a half-grin. She just nodded, swallowing hard, then led him onward. They descended deeper, away from the firefight raging above. The roar and flashes faded behind them, replaced by a tense hush that made Iona's ears ring with the echo of laser fire. Below, the architecture changed, becoming more ornate, with swirling murals carved into the walls. Reeve recognized them instantly as the temple's style. She paused to catch her breath, leaning against a pillar carved with ancient figures that seemed to dance in the flickering reflection of the orb's glow. Ionas took the moment to check him for injuries, just a few bruises, adrenaline still coursing wildly. Reeve straightened. "I think we're beneath the temple now. The vault should be close." He nodded, though a knot of worry twisted his gut. If those mercenaries survived, they'd come after them. But there was no turning back. They pressed on, each step echoing like a drumbeat in Iona's ears, each breath mixing with Reeve's in an intimate hush. The corridor sloped downward until it opened into a vast circular chamber that took his breath away. A domed ceiling rose overhead, inlaid with shimmering crystals that caught the light of the orb, reflecting it in kaleidoscopic brilliance. The floor was inscribed with a massive spiral design, reminiscent of the markings they'd followed. In the center stood a raised platform, ringed by graceful pillars. And upon that platform rested a triangular spire, taller than Iona's by at least half a meter, carved from what looked like translucent stone, faintly pulsing with an inner glow. "That's it," Reeve whispered, her voice trembling. "The Heart's Pyre." Iona's approached with cautious awe. The spire's surface seemed alive, swirling with prismatic colors that danced beneath its surface. Reeve knelt before it, filaments quivering, her eyes filling with tears. He couldn't imagine what it must feel like, finding the relic she pursued for so long, the legacy of her people. "Is it safe to touch?" he asked softly. She nodded, emotion choking her voice. "Yes. It was crafted to resonate with our life force. If it accepts me, it will awaken." She laid the memory sphere on the platform, pressing her palm to the Heart's Pyre. Ionas held his breath, glancing around for any sign of traps. But the chamber remained silent, as if holding its own breath in anticipation. Slowly, the spire brightened, responding to Reeve's touch. Her face lit up with awe, tears rolling down her cheeks. Then, from somewhere behind them, footsteps. Ionas whipped around to see the mercenary leader, his armor scorched and battered, but still functional, stepping into the chamber. A trickle of blood ran down his temple, and his eyes burned with wrathful greed. Several other mercenaries followed, guns raised. "That's ours now," the leader snarled, pointing a rifle at Reeve. Ionas jumped in front of her instinctively, arms spread wide. The mercenary snorted. "Move aside, human! Take one step, and I'll blow you both to bits." Reeve's tail lashed, fear and rage mingling in her expression. The orb on the platform began to glow again, as if responding to the threat. Iona's heart pounded. They couldn't fight them head-on. The mercenaries outnumbered them and had superior firepower. But maybe the Heart's Pyre could protect itself, or maybe the drones from above would come to their aid. His mind spun with possibilities, none of them certain. The leader advanced with a cruel smile. "Hand it over. Don't do anything stupid." Ionas felt Reeve's hand slip into his. She squeezed gently, a silent promise of unity, no matter what. He stared down the barrel of the mercenary's rifle, his pulse roaring. If he had to die here, he hoped it at least meant Reeve could get away with the relic. Then he realized her filaments were pulsing with a fierce light, syncing with the spire's glow. A surge of energy rushed through the chamber, crackling across the floor in arcs of violet lightning. The mercenaries yelped, stumbling back. The leader fired, but his shot went wild, scorching the ceiling. Reeve's eyes had turned incandescent, her entire body resonating with the spire. Ionas felt his hair stand on end as static electricity filled the air, a cosmic hum reverberating in his bones. "Reeve?" he gasped, worried she might lose herself to the artifact's power. but her grip on his hand never faltered. She looked at him, her glowing eyes full of pain and determination. Then she turned her gaze on the intruders. "Leave now," she commanded, her voice ringing with an inhuman timbre. "Or be consumed by what you tried to steal." Several mercenaries turned and ran, fear overriding their greed. The leader, trembling, tried to raise his rifle again. A bolt of purple energy lanced from the spire, striking his armor. He roared in agony, dropping to one knee. Smoke rose from the blackened plates, and Iona suspected he wasn't going to push his luck any further. Indeed, the leader finally spat a curse and scrambled out of the chamber, limping after his retreating allies. The energy dissipated as quickly as it had come. Reeve sagged, her filaments dimming, and Iona's caught her before she could collapse. She buried her face in his chest, trembling uncontrollably. He wrapped his arms around her, heart pounding from both fear and relief. The relic continued to glow softly, as though acknowledging Reeve's rightful claim. They were alone again in the silent chamber, mercenaries routed, darkness settling around the Heartspire's faint aura. "You did it," he whispered, brushing a stray tear from her cheek. "You claimed it." She nodded, exhaling shakily. "It's linked to me now. To my people. We can't let it fall into the wrong hands." He hugged her closer, feeling her warmth, inhaling her scent. "I'm with you. Let's get out of here. We can take it somewhere safe." She lifted her gaze to his, and for a moment, they simply stared at each other. The closeness, the rawness of the battle, and the near brush with death had stripped away their barriers. Slowly, her trembling eased. Her lips parted, and Iona's felt an overwhelming urge to kiss her, to prove he was alive, that they both were. But she hesitated, her eyes swirling with conflicting emotions. He realized that for all the tension, all the closeness, they were still virtual strangers from different worlds. Yet the bond forged in danger couldn't be denied. His breath caught as she raised a hand to his cheek, fingertips brushing his stubble. "Iona's," she began softly. Whatever she was about to say, it was lost when the ground under them rumbled again. They both stiffened, glancing around. The spire's activation might have destabilized the structure, or the mercenaries could be setting charges above. Either way, their time here was dangerously short. He helped her stand. She clutched the heart spire, which had shrunk slightly, as if conforming to a more portable size. The memory sphere pulsed beside it, forging a strange resonance. Iona's grabbed Reeve's hand, leading her toward an exit corridor that branched from the circular chamber. They had to find a safe path to the surface, and then to his ship, before the entire place caved in. "Come on," he said, voice tight with urgency. "We'll figure the rest out later." She nodded, eyes still glowing faintly, and together they sprinted into the darkness, relic and memory orb in tow, uncertain what awaited them outside this long-buried temple. In that moment, Iona's couldn't help but feel an odd sense of hope. Whatever came next, he wasn't alone anymore. And that, in itself, was worth risking everything for. The corridor they took angled upward, weaving through half-collapsed tunnels. Dust rained from overhead as aftershocks rocked the ancient foundation. Iona stumbled once or twice, each time feeling Reeve's strong arms circle his waist to steady him. Her breath was ragged, filaments flickering unsteadily, betraying her fatigue. Yet she pushed on, stubborn determination blazing in her eyes. The heart spire was strapped across her back in a makeshift sling, shimmering with a subdued glow that seemed to mirror her own ebbing energy. They emerged into a wide gallery, open to the sky on one side where a section of wall had collapsed. Iona squinted at the bright glare of the planet's sun, noticing swirling clouds of dust beyond. He recognized the general area. He had landed his small freighter not too far from here, in a patch of desert that looked relatively stable. The problem was that the path to get there was now strewn with rubble, and the mercenaries might be lying in wait. Reeve shielded her eyes, scanning the horizon. "We need to find cover until dark, or until we're sure they've retreated." He nodded, though the idea of waiting around in a half-demolished structure made his stomach clench. If the mercenaries had reinforcements, they might quickly overwhelm them. On the other hand, the drones below had put up a fierce defense. Perhaps the intruders had taken heavy casualties and would think twice about returning. Let's see if we can circle around. My freighter's parked north of here. She hesitated. Do you trust me to come with you? This relic, my people would kill to keep it from falling into human hands. He met her gaze. I'm not your people. I have no intention of stealing it. Besides, leaving you alone out here isn't an option, not after everything. A faint smile ghosted her lips. You risk a lot for someone you barely know. He shrugged, trying to lighten the moment. You're stuck with me, at least until you pay me in salvage, remember? She laughed softly, the sound strained but genuine. Fine, pilot. Let's go. They picked their way along the gallery, occasionally peering outside through jagged holes in the wall. The desert wind whipped through the openings, carrying a fine grit that scratched Iona's exposed skin. Reeve's suit covered most of her body, save for her arms and part of her torso, where swirling alien designs were etched into her flesh like living tattoos. He found himself unable to look away at times, marveling at the artistry of her biology. A few times they heard distant shouts or the hum of engines, sending them ducking behind rubble. After a tense wait, the sounds receded, and they continued. Iona's led Reeve to a half-hidden passage that opened to an exterior ledge. From there, they could descend to the desert floor, albeit precariously. He pointed to a rocky ridge in the distance. My ship's on the other side. If we move fast and keep low, we might avoid detection. Reeve nodded. Let's do it. They lowered themselves down the sloping rubble. Iona's tested each step, wary of loose footholds. Reeve followed with remarkable agility despite her weariness, the heart spire slung on her back never slipping once. Every now and then, Iona's caught her eye, and the unspoken warmth between them gave him courage. At the base of the outpost wall, they crouched behind a cluster of weathered pillars. The sun was brutal, scorching the ground so fiercely that heat waves shimmered across the horizon. Iona's mouth felt dry as paper, but he forced himself to focus. He scanned the desert expanse, spotting what looked like a plume of dust to the southeast, possibly the mercenaries pulling out. Or circling around. They had to be cautious. Ready? He asked, glancing at Reeve. She nodded, lips pressed into a determined line. Let's move. They dashed from cover to cover, using patches of rock and debris as concealment, forging a path across the blistering sand. Iona's breath grew shallow from exertion and the punishing heat. Reeve fared slightly better. Her alien physiology might have been more suited to this climate, but even she began to pant. At one point, she stumbled, and Iona's caught her by the waist, pulling her behind a jagged boulder to rest. Here, he murmured, offering her a small canteen of water from his belt. She took a sip, her eyes fluttering shut in relief, and then handed it back. He drank as well, forcing himself not to drain it all in one go. They needed to pace themselves. A faint drone of engines in the distance made them both freeze. Iona's peeked around the rock, heart pounding. He spotted a sleek hovercraft skimming the dunes, likely a mercenary patrol. They watched it pass, then pressed on, hearts drumming a relentless cadence of survival. Finally, after what felt like hours under the unrelenting sun, they reached the ridge. Iona's clambered up, using handholds in the rocky outcropping, until he could peer over the top. His freighter, a battered vessel with mismatched hull plates, was right where he left it, partially camouflaged by a net. Relief flooded him. We made it, he whispered, waving Reeve up. She joined him, gazing at the ship. It flies? She asked, half teasing, half hopeful. He smirked. It better. Otherwise, we're cooked. She exhaled, a tension lifting from her shoulders. Then let's not waste time. They scrambled down the other side of the ridge, approaching the ship cautiously. Iona's keyed in his access code on the hull panel, hearing the hiss of pressurized air as the ramp lowered. He ushered Reeve inside, scanning for any sign of sabotage. Everything looked in order, though the interior was uncomfortably warm from baking in the sun. He led her to the cockpit, quickly running pre-flight checks. Strap in, he said, motioning to the co-pilot's chair. She carefully set the heart spire and the memory sphere in a secure crate, then slid into the seat. He activated the console, crossing his fingers that the old bird still had enough fuel and no lurking mechanical issues. The engines hummed to life. Reeve watched, eyes darting over the displays. Ionas eased the ship off the ground, dust swirling in their wake. He took it slow until they cleared the ridge, then angled the freighter skyward. The desert stretched out below them, a tawny sea of dunes. Relief warred with lingering anxiety. At any moment, he expected a mercenary fighter to roar into view, guns blazing. But none appeared. Reeve sagged back in her seat, filaments fluttering as she exhaled. "We escaped." He nodded, tension loosening in his chest. "Yeah. For now. We should get off-world. Any place safe we can go?" She thought for a moment. "There's a system a few jumps away where some of my people still dwell. Maybe they can safeguard the heart spire." But what?" Ionas asked, leveling off in the upper atmosphere, preparing for orbit. She looked at him, vulnerability flickering in her expression. "I'm not sure they'll accept my claim. Some believe the relic is lost forever. Others might want to use it for their own ends. Bringing it to them is risky. But it's the only chance to preserve my clan's legacy." He studied her face, a swirl of emotions filling him, admiration, worry, a fierce desire to protect. It was crazy. He'd only met her hours ago, yet he felt bound to her cause in ways he couldn't fully explain. "We'll figure it out together. Right now, let's just get away from this planet." She nodded, a soft smile touching her lips. He engaged the ship's thrusters, punching through the atmosphere, feeling the vibrations rattle through the hull. Soon, they broke into the starry void of space, leaving the war-scarred outpost and the desert behind. Ionas plotted a course for a quiet corner of the system, far from prying eyes, where they could decide their next move. Once they were in a stable orbit, Ionas set the autopilot and leaned back, running a hand through his sweaty hair. Reeve unfastened her harness, standing on shaky legs. "I need to clean up, I think," she said, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "Same," Ionas agreed, eyes drifting over her dusty form. The suit she wore was caked with grime, and her luminous filaments were dimmed with residue from the ruins. "There's a small refresher station down that corridor." She nodded, then paused, glancing uncertainly at him. He sensed her hesitation, the myriad unspoken things between them. He gave a gentle nod of encouragement, and she slipped away, the tail of her steps swaying behind her. He watched her go, a maelstrom of emotions crashing within him. Relief at their survival, concern for the future, and an undeniable hunger for the warmth of her presence. He busied himself with post-flight checks, fueling calculations, and scanning the system for potential threats. Once satisfied they were alone for the moment, he locked in a cautious orbit and headed to the cargo hold to ensure the heart spire was stable. It pulsed gently within the crate, as though responding to the beat of the ship's engines. The memory sphere glowed softly beside it, a symbol of the centuries of history Reeve bore on her shoulders. After a few minutes, Ionas returned to the corridor. He could hear the faint hiss of water from the refresher station. A wave of longing hit him, swift and unexpected. He tried to shake it off, reminding himself that Reeve was an alien warrior who'd pinned him the first time they met. Yet that memory made his blood heat all over again. He sighed, heading to the small galley area to wash himself off. The ship wasn't luxurious, but it had enough water for a quick wipe-down. He peeled off his dusty clothes, scrubbing the sweat and grime from his skin. When he finally felt somewhat presentable, he pulled on a clean shirt and pants. Staring at his reflection in the polished metal wall, he barely recognized the haunted look in his own eyes. Surviving that ruin had changed something in him, some deeper sense of purpose, maybe. A sound behind him made him turn. Reeve stood in the corridor, hair damp, filaments gleaming faintly. She changed into a spare shirt he had in storage, which hung loosely on her slender frame. The difference in their physiques was obvious. It draped awkwardly on her shoulders, but she looked more relaxed, more human somehow, despite the glow of her alien markings. He swallowed, caught off guard by how the simple sight of her made his heart stutter. "I hope you don't mind," she said, gesturing to the shirt. "My suit needs cleaning, and I found this in your locker." "Not at all," he replied, voice quieter than he intended. "It suits you." She gave a soft laugh, glancing down at herself. "I'm not sure it fits, but thank you." They lingered in the corridor, an unspoken tension crackling between them like it had back in the outpost. Only now there were no immediate life-or-death stakes. Just the raw intimacy of two people who'd been thrust together in extraordinary circumstances. Ionas cleared his throat. "We're safe for the moment. I plotted a course out of the system, once we decide where we're headed." She nodded, stepping closer, her eyes locked on his. "Thank you, Ionas. For everything." He shrugged, attempting a nonchalance he didn't feel. "You saved us too, back there with the Spire's power. If anything, I owe you my life." Her gaze dropped to his chest, then drifted back up. The filaments at her neck flared in a gentle pulse, revealing the rise and fall of her breath. "You said we'd figure it out together. You meant that?" He nodded. "I did." For a moment neither spoke. Then she reached out, her fingers brushing along his jaw. His breath caught at the delicate touch. This close, he could see the faint speckles of color in her irises, like cosmic dust swirling in amethyst liquid. She slid her hand to the back of his neck, and he felt the slight tremor in her grip, as though she was nervous. But her eyes shone with resolve. Slowly she drew him in, and he let himself be guided. Their lips met in a tentative kiss. The contact was soft at first, a hesitant exploration. Then something deeper flared, a longing that had been building since that bizarre initial encounter. Ionas's arms encircled her waist, pulling her closer. He felt the warmth of her body through the thin fabric, the rapid thrum of her heartbeat against his chest. Her tail coiled around his thigh, a reflexive movement that sent a surge of heat through him. He deepened the kiss, heart pounding, senses awash in the ozone and flower scent of her damp hair. She made a quiet sound in the back of her throat, and he felt her filaments flutter against his skin, like soft brushstrokes of electricity. The tension of near-death experiences, of impossible odds, of shared secrets, all coalesced into this moment of raw intimacy. Neither of them had the answers to what came next, but here, in this stolen breath of warmth, they found a kind of solace. After a long moment, they parted, breathing hard. She leaned her forehead against his, just like she had in that ruined corridor, but this time it was a gesture of acceptance rather than desperation. Iona stroked the back of her neck gently, marveling at the fine ridges beneath his fingertips. She closed her eyes, exhaling in a shuddery sigh. "Ionas," she whispered, voice thick with longing and uncertainty. He pressed another soft kiss to her lips. "We'll figure it out," he repeated, quieter this time, reassuring them both. She nodded, then pulled away slightly, though she kept her hands on his shoulders. "We should talk about what happens next. My people might not accept a human traveling with me. The Heart Spire is a sacred artifact. But I can't leave you behind." "I don't want to." He studied her face, touched by the admission. "We'll handle it one step at a time. If they won't let me near their world, maybe I'll stay in orbit. I just don't want you to face them alone." She squeezed his shoulders, gratitude shining in her eyes. "That means more to me than you know." They stood there in the dim corridor, the hum of the ship's systems a soft backdrop, the desert dust still clinging to corners of their clothes. Everything felt surreal, as though time had folded in on itself since they first met in that dusty ruin. Ionas had never felt so certain and so terrified all at once. Yet he sensed that, with Reeve by his side, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. A chime from the cockpit interrupted the moment, signaling a navigational alert. Iona sighed, reluctantly stepping back. "I should see to that." She nodded, letting her hands drop to her sides. He caught her fingers in his briefly, giving them a small squeeze before heading down the corridor. She followed, and they settled into the cockpit. The display showed a subtle shift in local gravimetric readings, possibly an approaching patrol vessel. Ionas quickly adjusted course to keep them off scanners. Reeve studied the star map. My people are in the honor system, a few jumps away. We can attempt to land on the outer world and request an audience. Iona's glanced her way. Let's do it. Worst case scenario, we improvise. She half smiled, the lingering warmth of their kiss still visible in her eyes. I'll do my best to ensure they listen. But if things get complicated, we run. Iona's finished. Deal. He plotted the new jump coordinates, heart thudding. This was insane. He was about to escort a powerful alien relic to a hidden enclave of Reeves' people, risking his own life for a cause he'd only just discovered. Yet it felt right, a sense of purpose he hadn't known he needed. Beside him, Reeves' presence lent a steady flame of confidence. He engaged the faster-than-light drive, feeling the ship vibrate as it tore a path through hyperspace. The viewport shimmered with swirling lights, cosmic patterns dancing before them. He caught a glimpse of Reeves' reflection in the glass, her expression sober but resolved. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. She looked at him, the faintest smile tugging at her lips. They were in this together now, for better or worse. As the ship hurtled through the starlit void, Iona silently vowed not to let her down. She'd pinned him once in that mocking, brazen show of force. Now, in some ineffable way, he was pinned yet again, by the weight of devotion that had blossomed in his chest. And this time, he had no desire to break free. Together, they sped toward an uncertain horizon, hearts bound by the relic's glow and the fragile, precious bond formed in the depths of a ruined world. The journey through hyperspace took longer than Iona's liked. The battered FTL drive on his ship wasn't exactly top of the line, and he kept a watchful eye on the gauges. Reeve used the time to try to commune with the Heart's Pyre. She sat cross-legged in the cramped cargo hold, the relic resting in front of her, filaments gently shifting with each breath. Iona's glanced back from the cockpit every so often, watching as she sank into a near-trance state. He marveled at her serenity, the grace with which she handled this cosmic artifact that pulsed with unimaginable power. At times, violet light rippled across her skin, dancing between her filaments and the spire's crystalline facets. He thought he caught fleeting echoes of ancient voices, though perhaps it was just the hum of the engines. Even so, an air of solemnity pervaded the ship, as though they'd brought a piece of something far greater than themselves on board. Eventually, the FTL drive beeped, signaling their emergence into normal space. Iona's guided the ship out of hyperspace, dropping them into the honor system's outskirts. The local star glowed orange, lighting up a cluster of orbiting worlds. He scanned the area, relieved to find no immediate signs of corporate fleets or mercenary patrols. A handful of ships were registered on the scanner, but they were scattered and seemed disinterested. Reeve emerged from the hold, her expression pensive. I can sense the spire's energy adjusting to the star's resonance. We're close to my people, or at least to one of their enclaves. Iona's nodded, tension tightening in his chest. Any idea which planet? She motioned to the second world, a smaller orb partially obscured by swirling teal clouds. They call it Valaris. It's partially terraformed. A few clans settled there after the war. He ran a quick analysis. The atmosphere was breathable, temperature moderate. All right. Let's hope we can land without a welcoming party of plasma cannons. She managed a wry smile. We can only hope. He steered them toward Valaris, pulling up a decommissioned beacon code that Reeve had provided from her memory orb. It was old, likely predating the war, but it might open communications with any hidden outposts. As they neared the planet, Iona's transmitted the code, heart pounding in the silence that followed. For a long moment, there was no response. Then the console crackled with faint static. Unidentified vessel, came a voice in a language Iona's didn't recognize. Reeve stepped forward, quickly responding in the same tongue. Iona's caught his name and a few references to the relic. After a tense back and forth, the voice gave a short command, and Reeve switched off the comm. They granted us permission to land, sort of, she said quietly. They want to see the spire, but they don't fully trust us. Iona swallowed. We'll go carefully then. She nodded, resting a hand on his shoulder. Stay close to me. Let me speak for us. He gave her a tiny smirk. Says the woman who pinned me in our first conversation. Her eyes flickered with amusement. Times have changed. With that, they began their descent. The planet's atmosphere streaked past the cockpit windows in a kaleidoscope of teal and sapphire. Ionas guided the freighter toward a mountainous region dotted with bioluminescent forests. The coordinates led them to a hidden plateau where an ancient structure, part temple, part fortress, jutted from the rock. Defensive turrets perched along the walls, though none fired on them as they approached. Ionas carefully set the ship down on a rough landing pad near the main gate. As the engines powered down, Reeve retrieved the heart spire, carefully bundling it in a thick cloth, though the spire's glow still shone faintly. Ionas grabbed a small sidearm, just in case, though he doubted it would do much against an entire enclave of Reeve's people. Together, they lowered the cargo ramp, stepping out into the thin, crisp air of Valaris. A group of armed figures awaited them, tall, lean aliens with filaments similar to Reeve's, their eyes gleaming in the half-light of the planet's turquoise sky. One of them, a female with elaborate markings and a regal bearing, stepped forward. She eyed Ionas with cool mistrust before focusing on Reeve. They exchanged words in a melodic dialect, quick and tense. Reeve gestured to the spire bundle in her arms, her posture respectful yet firm. Ionas felt out of place, but he stood at her side, heart thumping, determined not to flinch under their piercing gazes. Finally, the older alien's demeanor shifted. She signaled the others to lower their weapons. Reeve exhaled in relief and turned to Ionas, beckoning him to follow. They passed through the gate into a courtyard lined with statues and luminous flora. He felt the weight of every curious stare from the alien watchers perched on balconies or patrolling the ramparts. Inside, the enclave was a blend of ancient architecture and advanced technology. Curving walls bore intricate runes, while overhead walkways supported sleek energy conduits that powered the settlement. Reeve led him to a central chamber, where a circular dais glowed softly. The older alien, who seemed to hold authority, beckoned Reeve forward. Ionas hesitated at the threshold, but Reeve took his hand, pulling him alongside her. A hushed murmur rippled through the gathered aliens. Reeve knelt on the dais, unwrapping the heart spire and placing it gently in the center. A collective gasp rose from the assembly as the relic's glow filled the room. Ionas sensed awe, fear, and even hope emanating from them. The leader approached, laying a hand on the spire, which pulsed in response. Her eyes widened, filaments quivering. Reeve spoke softly, turning occasionally to gesture at Ionas. He caught snatches of the conversation, something about her journey, the memory orb, the battle in the ruined outpost, the mercenaries. At times, the leader's gaze flicked to Ionas, appraising him with a critical expression. He tried to project calm, though inside he felt like he was under a microscope. At last, the leader nodded. She addressed the assembly in a resonant tone, and they bowed their heads. Reeve stood, relief washing over her features. She beckoned Ionas to follow as she led him into a side chamber, away from the crowd. Once the heavy door slid shut behind them, she let out a shaky breath. They've accepted the heart spire's return. And they'll let me keep it under my care, she said quietly, emotion straining her voice. They want to hold a ritual of reconsecration in 2 days' time. After that, the relic can be placed in a secure sanctuary. It's more than I hoped for. He placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a gentle squeeze. I'm glad. Really. Her eyes met his, gratitude flickering in their violet depths. But they're wary of you, Ionas. Outsiders have rarely been allowed on our sacred world. They think you might be a threat or a spy. I tried to convince them otherwise. He shrugged. I get it. I can stay on the ship if that helps. She shook her head, stepping closer. I don't want you exiled. Not after everything we've been through. You deserve respect. His heart warmed at her words, though he also felt a twinge of caution. Reeve, I don't want to cause a rift between you and your people. She rested her palm against his chest, the contact sending a shiver through him. You won't. I'll speak to the council. We've regained the heart spire, something many believed impossible. They have to see that you helped make this happen. He nodded, sliding a hand around her waist. She leaned into him, letting out a soft sigh as her filaments fluttered. For a moment, they simply embraced, the quiet chamber enfolding them. The tension of the day melted away, replaced by the warmth of each other's presence. Ionas pressed his cheek to the top of her head, inhaling that familiar ozone and floral scent. I've never had anyone stand by me like this, she whispered. My entire life, I've been an outsider among my own people, obsessed with a relic they deemed lost or unnecessary. Now, here we are, and I'm afraid to lose you. His chest tightened at her admission. He tilted her chin up gently, meeting her gaze. I'm not going anywhere. If your people want me gone, I'll wait for you. But I won't leave you alone again. She bit her lip, eyes shining with unshed tears. Then she tiptoed slightly, pressing her lips to his in a delicate kiss. He responded, pulling her closer, cherishing the trembling urgency in her touch. The stress, the longing, the unspoken fear of an uncertain future, it all poured into that kiss, forging a bond that neither had anticipated but both desperately needed. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his, breath warm on his skin. I should prepare for the reconsecration rite. Will you stay with me tonight? I don't want to face these walls alone. He cupped her cheek, thumb stroking just under her eye. Of course. She led him through the enclave's corridors, past curious stares from her kin. They ascended a winding stair to a small tower room, sparsely furnished but cozy, with a circular window overlooking the forest below. Reeve closed the door behind them. Ionas removed his boots and jacket, while she slipped off the borrowed shirt, leaving her clad in a simple garment that hugged her slender form. The sight of her luminous markings made his pulse flutter. She approached slowly, filaments casting a soft glow across the modest chamber. He opened his arms, and she came into his embrace, meeting his gaze with a vulnerability that stole his breath. There was no pretense now, no need for teasing banter or guarded distance. They were simply two souls who had weathered danger together, forging a connection that defied logic. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Are you sure? He asked quietly, searching her eyes. The memory of her aggression when they first met flashed through his mind, mingled with the tender kisses they'd shared since. He wanted her, undeniably, but he also wanted to ensure she felt safe. She answered by guiding his hand to the curve of her waist, pressing her body against his. Her gaze glowed, filaments shimmering in time with her breathing. Yes. I'm sure. Their mouths met in a fervent kiss, slow but heated with the promise of deeper intimacy. Ionas curled his fingers in her hair, marveling at its silky texture. She shivered at his touch, a soft moan escaping her lips. The closeness of their bodies stirred a heady rush of desire, underlaid with something more profound, an emotional resonance that transcended physical attraction. It was trust, mutual respect, and a sense of having found a companion in the vast emptiness of the universe. They sank onto the small bed, a tangle of limbs and hushed sighs. Each piece of clothing shed felt like discarding another barrier between them. He trailed kisses along her neck, following the line of her filaments, which sparkled in response to every touch. She explored him with equal curiosity, fingers splaying across his chest, shoulders, arms, as if memorizing each human contour. Their bodies fit together in surprising harmony, the differences in their biology adding a layer of wonder to the experience. Time blurred. The hush of the tower, the faint glow of alien moonlight through the window, the quiet gasps and murmurs of encouragement, they all melded into a tapestry of shared discovery. Ionas found himself lost in the sensations of her warmth, her scent, the rise and fall of her breath. Every fleeting moment felt like a gift, a reprieve from the chaos that shadowed their journey. Afterward, they lay entwined in a comfortable silence, her head on his chest. He traced idle patterns on her shoulder, still marveling at the softness of her skin interspersed with faint ridges where her alien physiology showed through. She let out a contented sigh, and for the first time, Ionas truly believed that they might have a future together. In that quiet space, with the memory of her heartbeats echoing through his chest, the world felt suddenly wide open. Eventually she spoke, voice hushed. I wish I could stay like this forever, but tomorrow brings so many uncertainties. He pressed a kiss to her temple. We faced them together. She nodded against him, wrapping an arm across his middle. Together. They fell asleep in each other's arms, lulled by the gentle hush of the night winds outside. For Ionas, it was the first time in years he hadn't feared drifting off, no nightmares of corporate enforcers or lonely starfields. Instead, he dreamed of violet filaments shimmering across a cosmic tapestry, and the warmth of a lover's body pressed to his, anchoring him to a new and hopeful reality. Morning arrived in a wash of pale sunlight through the tower window. Reeve stirred against him, soft and warm, and Ionas took a moment to watch her face before she opened her eyes. A pang of tenderness coursed through him, an unexpected depth of emotion that threatened to uproot every cynical wall he'd built over the years. When she finally woke, blinking at him with a gentle smile, he felt his heart skip a beat. "Hey," he said softly, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "Hey," she echoed, voice still thick with sleep. She stretched, her filaments flickering awake, then pressed a chaste kiss to his shoulder. "We should get ready. The reconsecration rite starts soon." He nodded, stomach twisting with nerves. He wasn't sure what the ceremony entailed, but he guessed it would be deeply significant for her people, and possibly the make-or-break moment for how they viewed him. Still, he forced a confident grin. "Lead the way." They dressed and made their way to the central courtyard. A sense of anticipation filled the enclave, with aliens moving purposefully across walkways. Many wore flowing garments adorned with symbols of the spire. Reeve guided Ionas to a raised platform near the dais where they'd placed the heart spire the night before. She told him he could stand there, on the sidelines, while she performed her role in the rite. The courtyard filled with onlookers. Reeve, now dressed in ceremonial robes that draped over her scaled shoulders, carefully carried the heart spire to the center. The leader from the previous day, whom Ionas now guessed was something akin to a high priestess or matriarch, joined her, chanting in their alien tongue. The melody was haunting, carrying echoes of longing and reverence. Ionas watched, fascinated, as the spire's glow intensified, dancing across the polished stones of the courtyard. Smoke from burning incense wafted overhead, and a hush fell upon the crowd. Reeve knelt, placing her hands on the spire. The older leader did the same, their filaments aligning in an intricate pattern of synchronized pulses. The assembled onlookers bowed their heads, and Ionas found himself doing the same, moved by the solemnity of the moment. A sudden rush of energy rippled through the courtyard. Ionas felt it like a static charge across his skin. The spire blazed with violet luminescence, shafts of light shooting skyward. Gasps rose from the crowd, though no one seemed frightened, more in awe. Reeve's face contorted in a mix of intense concentration and emotion. Ionas's chest tightened, wanting to rush forward to support her, but he held his place, trusting she knew what she was doing. In a blinding flash, the spire's light expanded, enveloping Reeve and the leader. Ionas shielded his eyes, heart pounding. When he lowered his arm, he saw Reeve standing, tears streaming down her cheeks, the spire's glow having settled into a soft radiance that bathed the entire courtyard. The older alien supported Reeve's arm, both breathing heavily as if they'd just run a marathon. Then a wave of hushed murmurs swept through the crowd, gradually swelling into a quiet, reverent chant. The ceremony ended with the spire's glow dimming to a steady pulse, like a heartbeat. Reeve bowed, and the leader embraced her, filaments intertwining in a gesture of profound acceptance. Ionas let out a shaky breath, relieved and oddly proud. Reeve had done it, restored the heart spire, earned her clan's respect, and possibly paved the way for a new chapter for her people. As the crowd dispersed, Reeve made her way over to Ionas, still catching her breath. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" She nodded, eyes shining with awe and residual tears. "I felt them, my ancestors. The history of my clan, all merged with the spire's essence. It's overwhelming, but beautiful." He smiled, leaning in to speak softly so only she could hear. "I'm proud of you." She took his hand, turning to guide him toward the older leader, who waited by the spire. Ionas felt a clench of nerves, but he allowed Reeve to lead him forward. The leader regarded him with cool curiosity, then spoke in halting standard, presumably for his benefit. You helped return our sacred relic. We owe you gratitude. Ionas tried not to stare in surprise. He bowed slightly. It was Reeve's determination that made it possible. I just did what I could. Reeve's cheeks colored, and the leader's gaze flicked between them, her expression softening with realization. She placed a slender hand on Ionas's shoulder, and though her touch was light, he felt the gravity of the gesture. You are an outsider, but you carry the trust of Reeve. In time, we may come to trust you as well. Ionas swallowed, forcing a gracious nod. Thank you. I appreciate that. The leader's eyes shone with ancient wisdom. The spire belongs to Reeve's lineage, but we will guard it as a clan. She may travel with it at her discretion. We will not hinder her. However, we ask you both to respect our boundaries. He caught Reeve's gaze, seeing the swirl of emotions there, relief, gratitude, and the shadow of bittersweet acceptance. We will, Reeve promised, voice steady. The leader stepped back, inclining her head in farewell. Then she turned and left, followed by several other aliens dressed in ceremonial garb. Ionas released a pent-up breath. Reeve's hand tightened around his, and he felt the silent message, it's done. We did it. The day passed in a blur of quiet celebration. Reeve and Ionas were offered a private chamber for rest and reflection. Servants brought bowls of fresh fruit, aromatic teas, and other delicacies Ionas had never seen. He sampled them with cautious curiosity, while Reeve leaned against the window ledge, gazing out at the horizon where teal forests stretched beneath a turquoise sky. Your people accepted you, at least in part, Ionas said, setting down an empty cup. That's huge. She nodded, but her expression was distant. I never thought I'd see this day. For so long, I was alone, chasing shadows of our past. Now I have the spire, the clan's cautious blessing, and you. He moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. She leaned back against his chest. What do you want to do? He murmured. Stay here, help rebuild your culture around the spire, or continue traveling? She sighed, the warmth of her body sinking into his. I'm torn. Part of me wants to remain, to make sure the spire is never lost again. But another part yearns to explore, to ensure no one else tries to claim our relic. And then, there's you. He turned her gently, lifting her chin so she met his eyes. You don't have to choose between me and your people. If you want to stay, I'll stay as long as you want me to. If you want to go, well, I am a pilot. He tried a playful smile, though vulnerability crept into his tone. I'll fly you anywhere. I just don't want to lose what we have. She cupped his cheek, filaments glowing with a soft pulse. You won't lose me, she whispered, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. He kissed her back tenderly, letting the moment speak for itself. Outside, the alien sunset washed the sky in oranges and purples, reflecting off the towering spires of the enclave. When they broke the kiss, she spoke in a determined whisper. I'll need to travel. The clan will keep the spire safe here, but I must find if there are any other relics lost to time. If I can preserve them, maybe we can prevent another war. And I don't want to do it alone. He pressed his forehead to hers, heart swelling. You won't have to. A gentle knock on the door interrupted them. One of the younger aliens peeked in, speaking quickly in their language. Reeve nodded, then turned to Ionas. We're summoned to a formal farewell ceremony. They'll bless our journey, if that's what we choose. He nodded, sliding his hand into hers. Let's go. The farewell gathering took place in a smaller courtyard lit by bioluminescent lanterns. It was a more intimate affair, attended by key figures of the clan. The leader from earlier offered blessings, anointing both Reeve and Ionas with a subtle shimmer of sacred oils. Ionas tried not to blush under the attention, but he appreciated the sincerity of the ritual. When the time came to leave, they returned to Ionas's freighter. Reeve retrieved the heart spire, which the clan had placed in a special containment field for safer transport. She handled it with reverence, careful not to damage the delicate crystalline lattice. Iona strapped it securely in the cargo hold, ensuring it wouldn't shift during flight. Many from the clan gathered at the edge of the landing pad to see them off. Reeve exchanged parting words with those she knew, hugging a few who embraced her with genuine warmth. Then, with final waves, the ramp closed, and Iona's headed to the cockpit. Reeve joined him, quiet with emotion. He started up the engines, the hum a familiar comfort. "You ready?" he asked softly as the ship rose from the ground. She nodded, gazing out at her homeworld. "Yes. There's so much more to discover." As they broke Valaris's atmosphere, Iona set a course for open space, where they could plan their next move. They had no shortage of leads, other rumors of relics, half-forgotten archives, star systems rumored to house hidden knowledge. It was daunting, but exhilarating. Reeve rested a hand on his shoulder, and he covered it with his own. In the swirling starlight, Iona's glanced at her, heart swelling with pride and affection. They were an unlikely pair, a human scavenger and an alien guardian, but maybe that was what the galaxy needed, unexpected alliances that bridged old divides. He smiled, recalling how she'd pinned him in that dusty corridor, how that outrageous moment had sparked a bond neither could have predicted. She smiled back, as if reading his thoughts. "So," she teased lightly, "still upset I sat on your face?" He chuckled, warmth flooding his cheeks at the memory. "Let's just say I've come to appreciate your methods." She laughed, a bright, melodic sound that filled the cockpit with joy. Then she leaned over, brushing her lips across his. "Good." They soared into the star-flecked void, hearts alight with possibility. The galaxy stretched before them, vast and full of hidden wonders, ancient mysteries, and maybe even further relics waiting to be claimed, or protected. Together, they would face dangers and forge new paths, bound by a love that had blossomed from a chance encounter in a haunted ruin. And if anyone ever asked Ionas how he found himself entwined with a fierce alien guardian on a quest to save her people's legacy, he'd grin and say it all started with one outrageous prank of a girl who sat on his face, and never let him forget it.